Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Welcome, Gary.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Today we have Gary E. Smith. He's the author of multiple novels as well as a short story collection. Some of the latest of it, which I think is More Than You Know, which is in the Warren Steelgrave series, correct?
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about that series and the latest book.
Well, the latest book has been submitted in 2 or 3 contests, but the 6 before it have all won international awards. So I'm excited to see what transpires out of this one. It follows the situation that the main character, the protagonist, finds himself in each of the novels as an aging writer. In the first novel, he never seen himself as a writer, but falls in love with a married woman that's a lot younger to him in an Italian class, and never believed in that kind of thing. So throughout the series, their relationship it blossoms. It goes through all the things many relationships do over a course of 8 or 9 years, and so each book is almost a chapter out of their 2 lives, and what's happening with them as they find themselves in these situations where the world's chasing him mostly to keep him from either testifying or whatever. More Than You Know is kind of follows that same theme. She's been on a world tour. She's a singer-songwriter. They haven't seen each other. They've been kind of separated, trying to sort out their relationship when he finds himself in a situation being chased by the FBI and a bunch of oligarchies from Russia. And so he finds out of there's a bomb threat in Milan on Easter through a mutual friend and a kind of side love interest who's a reporter. And so they get involved in disrupting that, and so there's a lot of twists, turns, a lot of suspense towards the end of the book, and I don't want to give away the end. So
No, not at all. Well, that's interesting because so is he himself involved in like the CIA, the FBI, some kind of operative?
it goes back to the first book. Like I say, he never seen himself as being a writer. He just lost his wife of 30 years and found family in Italy, and so goes to Italy and enters this Italian class where he meets this woman, and he's stunned. He never believed in love at first sight, and here he is. Well, her husband is involved with some has a coffee company, and they're laundering money for a bunch of arms dealers in Europe, and it's being orchestrated by the Homeland Security Director. So they're after her because she's got evidence that shows her husband and their business was that it's being done out of the FBI. So they're off to kill her, right? And the FBI doesn't want her. The head of national security doesn't want her caught until she can get killed because they don't know where the file is. So he helps her get out of Italy and back to her family, but they both fall in love along the way. But that's how the book ends. Well, as a way to stay in touch with her mentally, he starts writing a book out of the diary in his mind of what happened, just to keep hasn't seen her in 3 years. Well, the book becomes a bestseller by accident. And then in the second book, he's drug into another scenario. And so throughout the series, the FBI and the CIA, because of him now being a noted author, use him as ways to get into situations they can't get into. And so along the way, he teams up with a ex detective who's now a writer, and so they get into places, and they have, especially with the skill set of the detectives, they have ways of interrogating people without without having to need a search warrant or whatever. So both the FBI and local police find them very useful in some of these, and they get drug into these different scenarios throughout the series of books.
Interesting. So I read a little bit about your bio, and it seems like you also have multiple careers, like your protagonist. How did you come up, or how did you start writing, and how did you come up with the idea for the series?
Well, I guess I've always had a need to be creative. I started as a photographer as a very young age, and then at one point found myself being accepted to study with Ansel Adams and Ruth Bernhardt and a bunch of people in that life. And so I've always had that creative side. And then when I retired, uh, I went back to school to learn Italian because I had actually found family in Italy, and I was taking over and redoing a home in Italy in this small village. And so I found myself going back to school to study Italian. Well, we had to write essays, and the first half of the essay had to be from an article from Italy that didn't have to do with politics or anything. So to make sure you understood what you were reading, second half you could free write. And I just fell in love with the free writing. Being in Italy every summer, I had something personal to add to that part. I wrote always about something that was happening locally in the village, some festival, and I just loved it. So the next extension was to see if I had a voice, and I wrote the first book, and
Oh, that's
then
neat. So it's a
yeah.
little bit autobiographical then.
That's kind of what everybody says. Hemingway said that you can't write a good story unless you've experienced it. And so I've been fortunate. I've had all these reincarnations in my workplace. So I've got tons of characters and a deep well of people to draw from to build characters and add into the story, so that these all take place in Italy and the United States, each story, because he lives in both places just like I do. And so there's pictures. Being a photographer, one advantage I think I have is I can add my own photography throughout the book to explain a scene. You can try to write walking into the Galleria in Milano for the first time, but it's another thing to have a small photograph of somebody going in there at that time, and so kind of puts it in a more detailed perspective for the reader, I think. And I can do that. I mean, my phone has 4,000 photographs on it. I can do that without having to get rights from somebody or worrying about pulling a photograph off the internet and and having somebody come after me because I'm using their work.
Well, that's really neat. So you include the photographs in your books too?
Yeah. When my daughter come to visit for the first time, when she walked in the house, she just stood there and says, I know where everything is in this house. I'm reading all the books. And a lot of friends say the same thing, you know. It's a unique house. It was built during the Renaissance, and it's in a small village, and it's all described. Yeah, when you when you're reading the stories, and he's out on the veranda looking at the view with a martini when he gets the phone call and gets drug into some next adventure. Uh, it's that picture of that balcony is the balcony in the house. So
Wow, that's really neat. Hopefully you're not writing like how to break into my house, right?
no, I'm very careful about that, you know. I mean, all the places in the books are real, and I'm very careful to make sure there's no kidnappings, nobody gets poisoned in the restaurant or anything like that, and I wouldn't want to do that. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. I don't like kidnappings. That's one thing I can't. Well, I mean, for an adult to be kidnapped is one thing, and you still call that kidnapping. But when the kids are kidnapped, that's like when I draw my line. I can't watch it or read it.
Yeah, no, no, it's true. And I know a lot of people have an issue with most of my book. I think there was only one book that was written in the third person. Mostly they're all written in the first person. And a lot of people have, it gets tough for them in some, it's one thing to say, he walked into the smoke-filled room and snuck up behind the person and strangled them, right? But to rewrite that in first person, I walked into the room and I walked up behind him. It's a different scene for the reader, and and so it's got its good points, when he's talking about falling in love. But if he's in a situation where someone's getting murdered, and it gets real dicey for some people, So that's why a lot of writers will write third person, you know, because they don't want to get that involved in the story neither. And but I find it makes it a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. I hadn't thought about that. There are like standards in certain genres that usually it's third person in that thriller type genre. I love writing in first person. I love reading in first person.
Yeah.
But I write more fantasy and romances. But even in my fantasies, they sometimes have to kill people. So, but when you're talking about witches and fairies, it's, feels a little bit different than when you're talking about, real life, not real life people, but humans.
Yeah. And as a writer of fiction, I want my readers to fall in love with the character and then like the character. And all of a sudden the character makes a left-hand turn. It's like they're making the left-hand turn too. It can be a little tough,
Right.
because they're identifying with one of the characters.
Well,
And
but I think you can have a character perform acts of violence as long as the person sees and relates to the justification for that, right? If they're protecting someone or getting a bad guy, or they have good reasons for doing it, then there's going to be a lot of forgiveness there.
and I agree, but I write mostly for myself, and so I want it to be as realistic as possible to what's happening in my life, the past experiences in my life. Not that I've ever walked into a dark room and killed anybody, but I knew, through the construction industry, there was a lot of savory characters that had done that. I knew for sure, and so you get to know them pretty well.
Well, there's the standard, put the body in the concrete, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there was I had real pirates crews in them days, and you sure didn't want to meet any of them down a dark alley, although they were all gentlemen to the women in the crews, and if you didn't want to get a little savory with one of the women because you'd have to deal with these guys. They really respected women in the old traditional way, And, they seen all the women as either in their head there was a sister or a mother, and so there wasn't nothing much happening out on these crews of 70 and 80 men, and they kept them tight handle on everything. So
Well, that's endearing, yes. And you talked about a book of short stories. Talk to me about going back and forth between writing short stories and writing your novels.
yeah, I got to a point where I got bored with the series, and it was starting to, it's always every book you start's the same characters, and so it starts like it gets a little boring for me as a writer. So I thought I'd do a book of short stories. That was turned out to be a whole lot more difficult than I thought, because I did 28, 29 stories, something like that, in 7 months, 8 months to have it published. And so you go for a week, you're writing about a murder mystery, and then all of a sudden, the next story, it's a love triangle or falling in love, and so you're changing characters, you're changing theme, you're changing everything, and so you're like starting always from scratch. And I found it to be a great discipline. By the end of that 7 or 8 months, I could sit down and write a short story over a course of 4 or 5 days or a week very quickly, because you're just used to sitting down and coming up with character and taking off with it. So yeah, it was, and yeah, I didn't think it would get as much. It won an award, an international award, and I had gotten a lot of emails from people that it would identify with one story or another, and I didn't think it would get that much attention, but it did. And there's a famous she's called the blind artist. They interviewed her on 60 Minutes. She was a writer and started losing her eyesight, and so she started photography, and then as her eyesight got less and less and less, till she was almost blind. And she wrote a review of the one of the short stories was about a photographer, right? And she identified with that. There's a section or scene in the short story where he explains to his love interest that she wants to know why she's gone out and ran the same trails he's ran, but has never seen, comes back, and she's never seen his photographs that he photographs there in real time. And he explains to her, because the photograph gets manipulated color wise, screen wise, things taken out, and he goes through and she identified with that, because that's exactly what she does. She would, her photography now is she just take a scene that she can barely see the shadows of, and then go back to her computer, this huge screen, and she downloaded into that, and then she could see what she wanted to take out and what stuff to do. And so she identified with that part of the story, and she said of all of them, that was her favorite in the book. So I guess Hemingway was right, saying, if you want a good story, you need to write about what you've experienced, having been being a photographer all these years.
Right, you have a lot to draw on. I found writing short stories hard as a novelist because I was supposed to write in an anthology and I submitted something. My editor edited it. She said it was great, but it was kind of a spin-off from one of my series. And they were like, no, this is not going to work. They're like, you have too many characters, too many side plots. And, it was supposed to be 6,000 words. And so they sent me an author coach. But they ended up being right, because like when you only are writing that 6,000 words, you can only have a few characters, one plot line has to be, so focused on that one plot line. You can't have anything extra to divert the reader's attention.
Yeah, no, you almost can't get to 60,000 words without introducing a subplot of some kind. But it has to fit in. It has to make sense to the whole series, and so it can be difficult, And right now, the book I'm writing now, I'm at almost 30,000 words, and that theme has pretty much ended with these characters, and all of a sudden, uh, there's another character that's slipped into this plot was ending, and you can tell that it's going to take off a different direction. It's his good friend Jack Sullivan, who's also a writer, but he writes true stuff, and so he's been in this book in Italy about money laundering, and he's turns up at the house because he's wondering, hey, you guys were running away from a laundry thing. I don't know how much of what I'm writing about is the same characters, and so it's gonna get weaved in both plots together and take off that way. So
That
else
sounds
you're not going to be able to extend it,
right.
unless you spend like some writers do. A whole page on the wallpaper and the texture of the air in the room. You know what I mean? They, you probably have read books like that. They walk in the room and the air, there's smoke is like, you know, so certain texture and color, and there's a breeze coming through blowing the curtains a certain way, and on and on and on, right? I just want to go, yeah, it's a smoky room. Who's got the gun? You know?
So I won't have to skim through tons of
No, chapters are real short. Chapters are only between 1,000 and 1,200 words for most part. Uh, and people tell me they love that because they like a lot of people read before they go to bed. They hate falling asleep in the middle of a chapter. And so they can string it out to get through the chapter or two, and then it goes quickly, and so yeah, it seems to work out. I'm dyslexic, so I write short chapters. So it works out for all those that are dyslexic.
Nice. Well, they sound like a lot of fun. I'm assuming you translate them into Italian too. Do you translate them yourself, or do you have someone do it?
Three of the books have been translated in Italian, and because I have family over there, and I was comfortable having them translated in because my cousin, who speaks very good English, loves the books, right? But I don't think I'll do that anymore because I don't know how much of the subtle messages throughout the story gets lost in translation. I mean, once you learn a second language, you realize how how badly stuff gets lost in translation. It's just they don't have the words to describe what we're saying in English, and it's vice versa. The first book was entitled "The Willing," and I left a copy for an owner of a very famous restaurant there, who's born and raised, went to Oxford, and he's an elderly gentleman, and he was excited to get the book, and he come up to the table and says, "Hey, I hate to interrupt your lunch, Gary, but what does the willing mean?" See, did not, did not translate to British English, let alone in Italian how it would be. It was, and so I thought, yeah, I don't know how much is lost in translation. So,
Well, I would think in the context too, like as people who live in the United States and know the English language, there could be context behind the words you choose to say or relate something, right?
well, it's true, and not only that, but generational. I mean, when I first started writing 9 years ago, uh, everybody knew what a sap was. Okay. A lot of people didn't understand what a sap was, but you could Google it or look it up and you get at least get a definition, right? Well, you don't know more. You can't Google sap. You'll get sap of a tree, sap of this, you won't get what a sap is. And then my generation, a sap was the name for a blackjack. It's a small filled thing that you nail them behind the left ear and drop somebody. And so you get into even just generational, I hate to use words that people have to look up, but sometimes because the characters are blue collar, tough guys, this is the terminology they would use in dialogue to be correct, right? And Shelby Foote, the great author, said that you don't learn dialogue in a classroom. You learn dialogue by working alongside people and picking up their mannerisms and how they speak at the steel mill or the courtroom or the bank. And so if your characters are going to be real, the dialogue has to be real. And as you get older, you're losing a generation behind because they have no clue what a dial telephone is, and everything's moving so fast. you know
Yeah,
yeah
I was talking to an author last week and she said her books were about 20 years old. Like when she started the series, it was like 20 years ago. And she said, you just have those little things like they drop their phone and the battery falls out. Well, you drop
yeah
a phone now and the battery doesn't fall out, right? So she said,
yeah no
you have to have some other excuse for her
or
fumbling on
they
the ground to get whatever she dropped,
yeah
right?
or how about this one? She walked in the room looking for a phone and she found a dial phone on the wall. Try that one. My granddaughter, she was 9 years old before she realized we still had a dial phone left over from we've been in this house over 35 years. And when she realized, no, that's because the dial, she didn't know what it was. She just thought it was
Right.
some kind of, I said, no, that's a phone. No, no, that's a
No.
phone.
It takes so long to get them all the way around.
Yeah. So between generations and cultural differences, it can be, so no more books translated to Italian. Yeah, so it's I even my cousin, okay, she's a top executive at Fiat. She's been speaking English. Well, she graduated. She spent 2 years in college up in upper state New York, so she's been speaking English almost every day for the last 20 something years. Yep. I mean, she called me up last summer. She called me and she says, hey, can you meet me at the gallery and help move the library? Now I knew she meant the bookcase. Okay.
I'm like the whole library, like all the books.
Yeah, so you can see even in that, she loves the books and she reads the books, but I think there's a lot in the way I write. I hope it's a very good story, but there's always some underlying personal issue that Warren Steelgrave is working through for himself. And I think most of that would get missed in the translation.
Right.
And he's trying to deal with his emotions throughout this last book with the love of his life, who he feels, yeah, she loves him, but she's not in love with him. And that he doesn't, and he explains his good friend, he goes, well, you two going to get together and back together. And they're sitting there drinking martinis and he just looks at him and the guy says, well, how much she loves you. And he looks at him and says, Jack, I love this house. I love my dog. I love this martini. I love the way you back me up and we're in trouble, but I am not in love with you. And so it's those subtleties that I think culturally they and stuff that they wouldn't pick up throughout the story, you know.
Right.
So you know, and every one it's been like that. You know, the first book was falling in love. You know, is there such a thing as a as love at first sight? And how does that handle when it's a married woman with kids? And how do you handle that? And then the second one was, uh, you know, their relationship starts to blossom, and how do you handle that when you're getting death threats and you know different things, you know, and her career takes off. And here he's been the world-renowned author now by that point in time, and now her singing career takes off. And how do you handle that? Then you know how two successful people maintain their identity and their dreams alive when you love each other. You know, too often one person will support the other's career until they've molded into that career, and their dream of being an author or being a painter or a doctor has gotten absorbed in the other person's life and is no longer there. And so he's dealing with, from the man's point of view, when you're no longer the head guy, you're no longer, when you turn up on the scene, it's not, oh, it's Warren Steelgrave, the writer, and his wife. It's Cindy O'Brien, the Grammy winner, and her husband. Yeah. And he's dealing with that. He's dealing with that throughout the story for himself. And so, you know, so there's always this underlying theme that something's being worked out. And I don't think that translates well in another culture, you know.
Right. Interesting. So you said you have 10 books in this series right now, or you're writing?
I'm writing the 10th book right now.
Okay. And do you have a title or a date for that release yet?
Don't. I generally come up with the title in the last chapter of writing the book. You know, it's like I don't write to a title, and so hopefully something will happen, you know, in this last book, More Than You Know. The title come to me literally in the last words of the last sentence at the end of the book.
Very cool.
I was struggling thinking, what are we going to do? What am I going to do for a title for this? You know, I have no clue what I want to use for a title. And then I finished, I go, oh, there it is right there. I'll just use that.
So when they're looking to see why it's called that, they're not going to go to the very end,
Until the
right?
very, not until the very end this time. And normally it's in a scene somewhere, you know. The second book, you know, living a life separate together, you know, you get about through the third chapter and you kind of understand what the title is, because because their lives are separate lives, and how do they hold that together and maintain that love that they fell into in support of each other's dreams without giving up your own identity somehow. So, and so, yeah, they won't know, they won't understand the title till the end, you know.
Leave a little bit of mystery there. That's good.
Same with the book before, it was In the Blood, and in the, you know, it's not, well, it gets explained in about halfway through, you know, because he's struggling with all his past relationships. He's been married twice, and the third time lasted 35 years, and then it died, and he's wondering how much of that's his fault, and going on and on and on. And it comes out in a discussion that, yeah, this might be inherited. You know, bad relationships just might be inherited in the blood, you know. So,
Doomed to repeat.
yeah, You know, it's just, yeah, this is your love life. Accept it.
That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, his character in the book series sounds amazingly interesting. Tell everyone where we can find you and your books.
Well, you can find me at www.garysmithauthor.com. And for all who visit the website right now, they can get a free download of the latest book in audio. So,
Wow. Ooh, audiobooks. I love those.
you can get a free audio book by just visiting the site, and you got to put your email in is all it takes, is so that they can download and get downloaded to you, but that's it. So
And I will do that today. Gary Smith, author, your most recent book is More Than You Know. Thank you for being here. And I hope
thank you.
back with your next release.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.